Okay, good morning. I want to welcome you to the NASC Inclusivity Scholars Subcommittee session on LGBTQ plus voices in science and community. My name is Joanna Friesner. I'm the coordinator of the North American Arabidopsis Steering Committee. Also, we call it NASC. So a little background, NASC is a committee of elected faculty and also early career scholars that support fundamental plant biology with an emphasis on Arabidopsis. We were founded in 1992, and one of our ongoing main activities is that we organize the annual International Conference on Arabidopsis Research when it's held in North America. Right now, it's being held in Singapore, but NASC is organizing next year's conference in July in Madison, Wisconsin. Today's webinar features 4 panelists that have careers and background in plant biology. All of them have started within academia, and 2 of them are now in industry, and all are members of the LGBTQ plus community. This panel is being organized by the early career scholars on the call, and they wanted to organize it in conjunction with Pride Month. The goal is to promote inclusion, respect, and visibility for LGBTQ plus members of the scientific community. On a global level, we want to reinforce the message that science should be a safe space for everyone. Before we meet our panelists, I will briefly introduce the early career scholars that are organizing today's event. Daniela de la Mora is a biologist whose love for flowers led her to study developmental biology. She is currently a graduate student in Dr. Stefan de Fulter's laboratory at Sinvistav Irapuato in Mexico, where she studies the role of cellulase enzymes in the development of the gynoecium and fruit in Arabidopsis and tomato. Fernanda Gomez Mendez earned her PhD in biochemistry at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, where she studied the root aquaporins of the halophytic plant Mesembryanthemum crystallinum, also known as ice plant. Subsequently, she joined Professor Dehesh's lab at UC Riverside, where she learned targeted metabolomics and broadened her understanding of plant stress biology. Currently, she investigates the relationship between senescence and Golgi apparatus function in Arabidopsis. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Daniela, who will introduce our first panelist.
So hi everyone, our first panelist is Sterling. Sterling is a specialist in Aspiring Leaders program at Vast Agricultural Solutions. He is currently working with regulatory science teams in Germany, learning how regulatory strategy and product development play a critical role in bringing innovation to the market to help farmers. Previously, Sterling was a postdoctoral researcher in the lab of Dr. Surri at the Carnegie Institution for Science at Stanford and at the Plant Resilience Institute at Michigan State University, investigating phase-separated organelles in plants. His background is in molecular and cellular biology, and for his PhD, he investigated how plants survive abiotic stress through changes in RNA regulation. Outside of the lab, Sterling leads the LGBTQ Plant Scientist Network, advocates for LGBTQ visibility and support in STEM, as well as advocate for groups excluded from STEM. In addition, Sterling has led several LGBTQ student organizations to host symposiums and workshops to support LGBTQ students, as well as work on broader advocacy by chairing the Eastern Region of Tennessee Equality Project to support LGBTQ Tennesseans. Welcome, Sterling.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So the next speaker that we have today is Monstera Brown. She's a PhD student in Livas Back and Williams Lab in the Department of Plant Biology at the University of Georgia. Her research with plants investigates how anthropogenic change in Florida is affecting endemic plants like Lycia, that is a desert-like ecosystem in a desert-like ecosystem called the Florida scrub. So the focus of this research is the conservation and management through the integrative herbarium approaches to answer temporally explicit questions using resurrection experiments and phylogenetics. So Monstera is also the founder of the Trans Scientists Collective and a virtual community space that promotes support among trans scientists, and also of the Athena Trans Collective, a community network that supports over 200 trans people in Georgia. So welcome, Monstera. Thank you for being here.
Our next panelist is Jennifer Nemhauser, PhD, is the Benjamin D. Hall Endowed Chair in the Basic Life Sciences in the Department of Biology at the University of Washington. Her research with plants, yeast, and human cells sits at the intersection of transcriptional regulation, hormone signaling, development, systems, and synthetic biology. Before coming to Seattle, Jennifer did her doctoral work on auxin and flower development at UC Berkeley with Dr. Patricia Zambrinsky, followed by an NIH postdoctoral fellowship on plant hormone networks at the Salk Institute with Dr. John Corey. Jennifer has been recognized as an elected member of NASC and IPGSA, a University of Washington Outstanding Undergraduate Mentor, an Allen Distinguished Investigator, and an HHMI Faculty Scholar, among other awards. Integrated into her scientific pursuits, Jennifer investigates how to effectively disrupt structural inequities in academic science, including systemic racism, transphobia, and ableism. She has especially focused on understanding how and why mentorship of graduate students so often falls short, and co-creating a department-wide plan for concrete changes at the diet, team, and departmental levels. Jennifer intermittently records her thoughts on mentorship and lab culture in the audio series Seriously, Seriously, available through her lab website. Welcome, Jennifer.
And then we also have our panelist, Roman Ramos Baez. He's a PhD that is working right now as a scientist in Arcadia Science, where he applies evolutionary approach to facilitate drug discovery using algae, yeast, and other organisms. He did his doctoral work as a Gillian Fellow in Professor Jennifer Lab, and also in the University of Washington. And then he did a postdoctoral work in Joe Thornton Lab in the University of Chicago, focus on using evolutionary and synthetic biology to study the function of auxin response pathways and the proteins component in that pathway. So he also received a lot of recognition during his scientific work as a fellow in the Woodrown's Wellcome Fellow, as a Chicago Fellow, and also as a Hannah Gray finalist. Roman is committed with queer and trans advocacy and inclusion in the lab, and has time and time again take him outside of the lab. So he has developed and present resources that provide actionable items for mentors and queer trainings, serve as a consultant on prioritizing queer and trans survival in academic settings, perform as a drag in the community outreach events, and also has written in the Scientific American calling for the improvement of gender data collection and funding agency. So thank you all of you to be here.
Thank you, Danielle and Fernanda, for introducing our panelists. And thanks to all our panelists, of course, for being here to share your perspectives on academia and industry and the scientific community in general. So we have developed some prepared questions for the panel, which we will start with. And we will also have time for Q&A from the audience. You can submit a question through the chat, or if you prefer, I will paste a link into the chat to an anonymous question form so that you can ask your question that way. Depending on the time and how many questions we have and how fluid and wonderful our conversation is, we may not get to all the questions today, but we'll do our best. So Daniela, can I start with you and to lead off the questions to the panel?
Yes, sure. Our first question is, what drew you to plant science, and what do you think visibility of LGBTQ plus scientists is important in this field?
Oh, Roman, you can go if you'd prefer. But otherwise, I can go. I can kind of sum it up as I came for the plants, but stayed for the community. Um, so originally, I always loved the plants. Growing up, I was a kid. I loved to be in the garden. And then as I got older, I lived in a college town. And so I actually got college textbooks when I was in high school on plant biology. Then I continued that love in college. And in college, I actually got to go to the ASPB Midwestern meeting, meet more of the community, as well as, through by doing research, meet more of the community as well that way. And I've always just not just loving the plants, but there's great people in our community, not just for their passion, but also they want to help people. They want to make sure that this is a community for all of us. And it's been kind of continuous throughout my career meeting all of these great people who are doing this work, including both Daniela, Fernanda, as well as Joanna, seeing you guys do this work for the community as well as the other panelists. And so it's really, been awesome to get to work with everyone over these years. As far as representation, I know it's what I would have wanted to see when I was younger, is an LGBT scientist. Um, Actually, growing up in the late 90s and early thousands, the only queer representation was gay men as hairdressers, and not in STEM. And so I've always, you felt kind of excluded or didn't really know if that's an actual career choice, because is it actually going to be accepting? But I'm hoping that with this work as well as this panel, it helps bring a bit more visibility for the next generation.
All right. I have some similar reasons. I think for me, I always liked biology. And I always thought I would be like a medical doctor. I think a lot of us are just like, I want to be a doctor because I want to help people. And then I kind of became disinterested in this because of like the way that US healthcare works, and it just like felt exploitative. And I was just like, what else can I do with biology? Plants. That is one part of it. Another part is I at the time at least, I know that this is like now a reality for people, but like engineering and genetics and humans like felt very like ethically ambiguous and if not like wrong. And so I knew that I could have a lot more fun with that type of work and a lot more impact in plant biology through agriculture, all sorts of things. And so I felt like it from like a moral standpoint and like an ethical standpoint, but also like a fun with science standpoint, just plant biology seemed really interesting. As far as why I think queer representation is important, I think, or like why it's important for us to be in this field, I think, we just happen to exist in every field. And so for that reason, we should be represented because otherwise that would be unethical, and it would also be create a scientific culture that is biased. And to me, as a scientist, being not unbiased, but like having our different biases all working together to hopefully cancel out, I think is important. And I also understand that being queer and or trans is difficult and sometimes dangerous. And so to exist openly might help people. Um, might as someone that is like has a privilege to be able to exist so openly might help support other people in their ability to exist more safely just because I can serve as an example for their mentors and their peers. Um, and yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thanks. I think maybe I'll just add to what Romy just said, what Roman just said, is that I think for me, like in addition to the importance of visibility, I think a lot about uh, epistemology, like how we actually understand the world. And there's a very famous queer theorist named Eve Sedgwick who had this idea that I really love that's deceptively simple, that is that people are different from each other. And I think in a very profound way, we all are quite different. Like we are not monoliths, like those of us on the panel, like the queer community is not that way. And I do think that there is an incredible amount of sort of Black liberation theory, disability justice work, and queer work um, that helps us understand the sort of radical possibility of throwing open all of our communities to like the greatest diversity of ideas and ways of thinking. And I think especially like no, like I can't think of a place where it's more important than science for that to be the case. So, yeah. And of course, I think, plants are just incredible and are inherently um, deeply alien. And I think that practice of being in relationship, growing a relationship with plants is an incredible opportunity to develop curiosity and empathy for otherness. And for me, that is just a constant inspiration. So that's kind of, yeah, how I would answer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the same way. I think plants are just like so, so cool. I mean, when I was a kid, I was a Boy Scout, and so that's like what got me, into nature, into hiking, into camping, still love all of that. But I kind of stayed to be spiteful. I'm a creature who lives off spite, and I don't know. I saw there was no one like me and my undergrad. There's frankly still no one here, in my department who looks like me. And so, like, part of me is spiteful. Like, I wish I had a me when I was a kid. So, it's to be visible is like one of the driving factors of why I'm here. I'm here to do like cool science and be trans and be cool. And I think that's like really powerful, just like for other trans people who are just starting out in their careers, just starting undergrad, just starting high school. I think it's really powerful to know that there are people like you who have gone through the same struggles and have still made it out the other side.
Thank you for your answer, Cruz. So our next question is how your identity as a LGBTQ plus scientist shaped your experience in academia, and what do you think is a truly inclusive research environment like that we should look everyone to that place? Yeah.
I can start off. I know I just spoke, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, I think being queer in science has shaped a lot of my work. I started off when I came to grad school doing sex system work and kind of exploring how weird plant sex can be. My favorite example is there's this weird asparagus species that can make like YY individuals that are fertile, and they make like so it's like two male plants can germinate to form a non-binary child, and like that is like that sparks some interest in me. It's really cool. Um, so just like knowing how weird humans are and how weird plants are, it just really makes sense that like when I do my science, I frame it in kind of a queer lens because there is so much misconceptions about basic biology and the kind of the fundamentals of biological sex that get lost and politicized when it just like really is strange and weird and cool. Um, so that's that part. And then truly inclusive environment to me looks like everyone wanting to be better. And that's something I really appreciate about my current PIs. It's like they will mess up, they will do things that I'm like, okay, that was not cool. But at the end of the day, if I tell them like, hey, I really want you to do better, they'll do better. And so for me, like that's true allyship is putting yourself in a place where you can learn and holding yourself accountable. I think that like really makes some place feel truly inclusive to me.
I'll happily go. Um, yeah, I'm gonna start backwards with like how we can be more inclusive. I think at the end of the day, everyone is their own person and they have I feel like so hard trying to come up with like a rule book for like if someone has this identity, do this and that. And it's just like never works because of intersectionality and also just because we're all so unique. And so I think mentors that really take the time to really understand who they're mentoring and or like who your coworkers are, um, and ask those questions that could sometimes feel like very uh, I don't know. Like sometimes it can feel personal, sometimes it could feel invasive. Sometimes it is, and it's on the people having those conversations to set boundaries and decide kind of like what they need and how what kind of relationship they want to have with each other. But yeah, just like really catering your relationship to each person as you would outside of the lab. And yeah, I guess the first part of the question was about how my identity shaped how I do science. I think from a very young age, I knew that I was queer, and so I also knew that society had a lot of opinions about that and about who I was based on that. And so and also there was very little information out there. And so from the very beginning, I was just like, I need to investigate. I need evidence for like who what I know to be true. Um, and then also a lot of like difficult conversations with family about like, okay, you think this. Well, let's find out if that's true. And like, I'm not gonna say yes or no. I'm just gonna like look into this before I like state like a strong opinion because I really didn't know. Um, so yeah, I think it's made me like inquisitive and it's also made me like okay with not knowing and like that like constant discomfort of like maybe nobody knows and that's okay. Um, and also, I guess, made me kind of crave that type of environment where I'm always questioning something. But also with my science, I think it also makes it okay for me to be okay with like a non-binary answer with like not everything is yes or no. And actually, some of the most interesting questions have answers that are kind of a mixed bag. Um, so, yeah.
I can go next. So I think it's kind of been very liberating as growing up. I was out when I was like 14, and so I was out throughout high school. And it's very liberating because you can actually just be yourself. You can be kind of weird, quirky, and it's, you know, you get to just be free. And so being in science, it's you can actually ask weird questions. You can go into weird areas and actually, you know, learn not to care too much of what other people think. You still have to publish, of course, but you can actually explore new things that maybe don't occur or not mainstream, and you've gotten used to that over the years. Um, I'd say that that's been a big part, but then also a large part has been for my scientific careers finding the community as well. Because every time I've had to move for school, I've had to find a new community. And you know, if you're an undergrad, you're trying to do organic chemistry classes, calculus, some biology course as well, and then on top of that, you'd like to have friends who actually understand you outside of the lab. And so, kind of always working towards that. That's an extra thing to juggle that I feel like a lot of our peers didn't have to do in grad school. But it's also been very rewarding because you actually make a community if there's not one there, or you join one and can actually help shape it. And so it's been very liberating as well as, you know, a bit challenging, but very rewarding over time. And as far as inclusivity, um, so I'd say, you know, learning how to interact with people. Everyone is different and everyone is going to have different opinions and all that. But learning kind of how do you work with other people. We had a deaf summer REU student, and I tried my best to learn as much as I can before they joined. But boy, there is a different culture. There's a different way of doing things. Some things are considered rude that I did not realize. But they let me know, and I did not do that again. And that is what I expect from a good inclusive environment is we have an open dialogue and we improve together. So.
Okay, I guess I'll round this out. I'm the old person on the panel. So I'm 54. And I am bi or pan, genderqueer would be the ways I would describe my identity. And because of a lot of those identities having different dimensions to them, and the fact that as the academy, sort of as you go through professional spaces, and advancement, especially in a university setting, it gets straighter and more gender confirming at like every level. I would say from my college experience through being a full professor at every of those stages, that it holds true. And because my identities have some duality or multifaceted nature to them, like there's a constant sort of pushing back into the closet actually at all of those stages, and a real high incentive on allowing people to make assumptions that I'm not queer. I have a partner who's a queer cis man, so that also, at every step, no matter what language I was using to describe that relationship, other people always make the assumption that we are straight. And so that's, I think that, what do I want to say about that? I guess for me, that constant awareness and constant decision making has made me appreciate I think the sort of power situations that are always the sort of power lines that are always running, that are always, sort of what happens when you're on one side of that line or the other, like what opportunities are offered or denied, what community is possible and what is not, how exclusion works. And I think some of that, I think in a lot of ways, for me, as someone who has really studied queer theory really deeply and has much more to still learn, of course, I think that power, that ability to see power, is something that many queer people, whether they would even identify it or not that way, have a really strong ability to sense. To sense those differentials, and I think that similar things are certainly the case for people who are um, have other underrepresented or marginalized identities in STEM. And especially if you start combining some of those identities, it's even a sharper sort of sense of exclusion. I think for me, what that means in terms of creating an inclusive environment is kind of, there's a lot of dimensions to that. I mean, I would say I spent my entire career trying to understand that. So I'm going to be very brief, but there's just to say it's the tip of the iceberg. Um, I mean, for me, the most sort of probably the person I've learned the most from in my life around how I want to be in the world is Audre Lorde, and is someone who wrote about a whole different way of thinking about power that she termed the erotic, and not in a sexual sense, but this defined it as like erotic power happens when people work alongside each other in deep connection and experience joy in that working together, and through that joy are able to actually get very curious and excited about the differences between people and less scared about those differences. And for me, when I'm trying to think about how to make an inclusive environment, which I am never like, that's a journey that will never end. Like, every person who I get to work with teaches me things about how to make my research work and my own life my more inclusive. I just try to like think about that, like where do I find that connection, that ability to really help another person be able to connect to that joy of working in community, because that is something everyone deserves to have in their life. And for so many people, especially in this time, um, it's just really rare. It gets more rare all the time. So,
Okay, thank you so much. So we can move to our next question that I think is really related to what all of you said. So, what role has the community played in your journey, and how can scientific communities better foster inclusion and a sense of belonging?
I can start again. So I mean in undergrad, so I'm also like just like freshly into my PhD, going into my third year. So I'm very much in the early career stages, which has been a lot of fun. I think it's so fun to not know anything and just keep learning. But in undergrad, I had um, a mentor who like it was a very like a don't ask, don't tell situation. But like as we got closer and he became, more and more of a mentor figure, not just in my academic career, but in my life, we started, opening up more and more. And again, like seeing that representation really, really did serve me so well. And I think really that the thing that it taught me the most was I was always conflicted whether I could be well, I had to choose between being authentic and or being a scientist. And so it really taught me that I can be both, that I can have both. And so I think it's really like stepped up how I do science, and that I get to be myself and do science. And like that's really cool. I don't have to shy away from the things that people don't want to know about or that people find ugly about people. Um, and more kind of literally here in Athens, my community is like just a shining star. I mean, I started, the Athens Trans Collective 2 marches ago. I have like 200 members, which is, I mean, crazy to think. I feel like I flipped over every rock and log in Athens and they all skittered out like little critters. And I'm so, so blessed. Like I get cucumbers from gardens. Like that's really great. That's really beautiful. I get soup. Soup is great. And the thing is, when you're working so hard and you have people who are just there for you, like without asking, like it makes it all worth it because, as like queer scientists, we face all these other barriers that people don't normally think about, things that are subversive and kind of invisible. And so just to have people in your corner to believe in you is really, really powerful. And yeah, I think like the biggest thing is even they, just like my mentor in undergrad, like taught me that I can both be a scientist and be authentically myself. And I think that's like really, really something that I've thought a lot about and internalized, and I'm really happy for it.
Yeah, I think the role of the community is essential during like grad school because how many times do you come home after like a long day and the experience just didn't work and it's kind of like the biggest thing in your life, but then you go to some community meeting that's, I'm talking about non-scientific communities, and you get to actually put in kind of perspective. You still get to see people. They don't care that your experiment or PCR failed or you couldn't purify the protein that week. It's not important to them, but they like to see you, they like to talk to you, and you get to really put life back into perspective that the scientist is one part of your identity, but there's a lot of others. But then having said that, also the scientific communities are great because kind of when I was younger, I remember everything was very much in person. And there's been a nice shift over the years. Everything's more virtual. And so it's actually accessible. So you don't have to always go to the conference. You can actually meet other folks in plant biology across the world or even in the next city over at a lot of different events. And you can actually make a virtual community, nicer in person, but still you don't always have that kind of options to actually have that community and actually kind of commiserate together through times, but also celebrate each other. And then just talk about how life is going in your career. And so it's just been every kind of turn of my career, it's always been the community that's been there that I've been able to really rely on for support. And then as far as professional, or as far as I think the other question was for professional societies, how we can make them better. I'd say keeping everything open, having open discussions and listening to your members, like what we talked about of inclusive environments, just if people are bringing up issues, actually address them and talk about them and open and do your best to address them as much as you can.
I'm going to happen to quickly say that historically, I had a very separate, like my queer community was very separate from my professional community. And it was actually, I think, having Roman in my lab who really provoked me, like kind of kept pushing in various, very gentle and loving ways to push those things closer together. And I think that that's something that also comes over time for growing. I think that the current generation of early career scientists is absolutely incredible. I love working with them. I love the continual evolution of what the community can be, what it should look like, how people actually understand their various aspects of their identity in connection to their science and in connection to the rest of what they do. Um, I think it worked okay for me to have two lives, but it's way better not to. And so I think similarly, I guess, I think scientific communities have to let go, like very absolutely, of the idea of meritocracy, like the idea, these illusions of like what makes someone's work impactful and like who's important in the community, and who and like also I think the things we talked about before, just like when, and it sort of relates exactly to what Sterling was just saying, and actually what I think actually what everyone has said at different parts of their answers, like when someone makes a mistake, which is inevitable, whether that's as a formal society or whether as an individual, the response has to be like a humble curiosity, like, oh, I didn't realize, I will apologize in the way that feels um, restorative to the relationship, and which is not sermoned by me, but by the person that I've harmed, and that I will actually do better in the future. And I think we don't really, I think that's not modeled in our societies currently. I think they're quite timid and often do harm that they try to move beyond quickly and hope people forget more than they're willing to sort of dig deep. And I say that as someone who like supports society. I love NASC and also feel like I want to continue for it to be more brave and more of a leader and less of a sort of conservative follower, especially in these moments where, as we've already alluded to, like queer folks, especially trans folks, and especially trans folks of color, are in active extreme danger in so many of the places, who are plant biologists as well, right? Like they are all, and so yeah, I think we have a lot of work to do to really put those folks in the center of our conversations, and think about how we could really serve them.
Totally. I also want to say that, like, for me, trying to bring the two communities together in grad school was an experiment. And I feel like in a lot of ways, I was surprised by community response. Like for the plant biology community, it was very positive in a lot of ways. And it opened up a lot of doors for me to do that. And so that has encouraged me to continue to do that. Um, but yeah, I think it was a big risk. Before that, and even actually during most of grad school, I felt like I definitely lived a double life. I mean, and I know like people might think like we're all living a double life, we all have our professional and our personal lives, but it's more than that. It's like communities that like if they were in a party together, like they would like have very little to talk about in common. Or they would if really got to know each other, but like they wouldn't want to go to the same place or do the same things. And that's okay. And I think actually that was a big joy for me in grad school is just like really getting to know people within academia, and sometimes I really didn't want to be like sometimes that's where I felt safe is actually just like in the lab, just like zoning out and doing, or like zoning in I should say, into like the work. um and sometimes, yeah, and like not being up late at like doing a drag performance at some dingy bar for like 10 people and getting paid $50. And so I think yeah, at the same time, I think there was a lot of opportunity because of the environment that Jennifer created. Like there were other queer people there. And so it facilitated and made it safe for me to take those risks. And so I think not just with my like queerness, but also my Latinidad, like in like a lot of my intersections where I am in some way like underrepresented or a minority, I've found that, I mean, historically, this is not just me, people that are within my community that share those identities with me are the ones that are giving me opportunities and putting my name out there and promoting me and supporting me, and sometimes that's me choosing them to be that person that's advocating for me, but oftentimes it's them on their own accord because they see something that they want to amplify in me. And so that also makes me upset because I realize how, one, academia is very isolating. And so sometimes your lab is very small or your department is very small. And so there's a lot of people out there for whom they don't have those advocates and they don't have those people around them. And so, yes, I get to benefit in that way, and I feel awesome for that. But then I also, everything that happens to me that I'm like really happy about also reminds me of like how scary it is for a lot of other people that don't have those privileges and don't have that community as readily. So yeah, community is always going to be important. And that's just history. Like that's not just me.
Thank you so much for your answers. I mean, you guys already explained about how to make community, how the community is important, but can you share with us an advice that you can give it to the queer scientists out there, like in any stage, any an advice, a short advice to, yeah, that they can hear or later when they see this video. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I have very fast, quick advice because I know we want to get to questions too. So I have a teacher, Della Mosley, who I will shout out. It runs an incredible organization that does free or very inexpensive counseling, actually, at the Wells Center for anyone who has a Black femme identity, especially for queer folks. But the two things that Della has taught me that are apply, I think, here are that your worthiness is absolute and inviolate, and also the work is always needing your attention. And the second part is that healing takes a lot of doing and undoing. And I would say my advice to people who are navigating academic spaces, actually, regardless of their identity, is find the people that reflect back your worthiness to you and support you in your healing work, because we all have healing work to do. So that's my very quick advice.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean my advice to queer scientists is just keep it moving, queen, because honestly, like no one's gonna love you more than yourself. And I mean I talked earlier about how spiteful I am as a person and the reason I am here is in spite of it all. Um, for allies, for people in academic spaces who want to better support inclusion, one of my favorite short essays is Peggy McIntosh's Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. And it provides some great advice for someone who lives in the majority for how to navigate being more inclusive and being a better ally in a way that is very manageable and very real. I think two things that I really appreciate is like honor people's outrage, honor how upset people are like in this political space right now. Like people are just frankly under attack for being who they want to be, for who they are, and consider it your problem to fix. Like it is your problem to fix. Like you are part of the society and culture and you benefit from it. So spend your unearned privilege. Also like watch a film, read a book. It doesn't have to be a really sad one. Watch watch But I'm a Cheerleader with RuPaul and Natasha Lyonne. It's fun and you can learn something.
I'm gonna piggyback off that where, yeah, find your community or find your people. But if there's not that there, make your own. You'll be surprised at how many people do want to help you, how many people do want to support you. Sometimes you might have to ask a few people, but people are there who want to help you and really support you throughout the way. And then I'd also like to say that if you just Google search LGBT plant sciences, there's actual links that pop up nowadays that actually have all those words together. I remember starting like 10 years ago, there wasn't anything. And so there's a lot of resources now. There's also a nice blog post series we hosted about 8 years ago on Plante of a lot of early career researchers documenting their experiences. And so you're not alone. There's a lot out there and it's also documented for you whenever you need it.
I would say you don't owe your identity to anybody. You don't have to come out to every single person. You don't have to just like present yourself any specific way. So just like really follow your gut. You know who you should find someone, whether it's online or in person, that like really understands you because it really helps. And also you'll always learning about who you are. So it helps to have someone else out there. Um, and any privilege you have, like I think the best, like do something. With like Monstera said, like I think the best leaders are people that are doing it out of necessity, not just because they want to be in charge or they want to, you know. And so, I mean, a lot of my leadership has been just like, well, no one's doing this, so I'm just gonna do it because I feel comfortable enough to do it. So and sometimes I wasn't safe and it was actually like not smart, but it was yeah, usually it's better to be visible. Um when if in those cases. Okay. I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much for your answers. So right now we are gonna go move to the Q&A questions that we have. We have one from the chat. So the question is this one: as a cisgender straight man, how should I adjust my mentoring to create these safe spaces for all? And I guess treating everyone the same way, like doesn't matter the background, may not be the best approach. Like because if we assume everyone is the same background, I think that person is asking that. I mean, Liz is asking this. So how can I help queer mentees to navigate academia in their experience if their experience will be different to what his experience that it's different. Mhm.
Okay, I can start, I guess, as the on the PI side, as someone who has had to navigate some of that aspect myself, with always having people in my lab who are not me, as it turns out, in all sorts of different ways. And I have a lot to say about that. Actually, so my Seriously podcast actually goes on at quite length about that. So it has transcripts. You can read it, skim it quickly if you're interested. But I will say one thing to start with that I think is quite nice is to have a lab retreat and actually work on lab values and make a lab handbook and try to talk through, let the community come to a sense of what is this group of people at this moment? How do they define what support looks like? How do they define what respect means? And actually bring a sense of curiosity, model that sense that you don't actually know everything and that you're trying to acknowledge that different people might come to like a very different expectation of how to deal with conflict, how to deal how to navigate constructive criticism, like all of these different things. I think having an open conversation that starts with the assumption that there will be differences that are worth articulating starts to model in the group, and it will encourage your colleagues and your mentees to come to you if something isn't feeling great, and will allow you to have an open conversation to work towards getting better, and improving the environment. So I think that's what I would say. Starting from a place of not knowing and actually really being open and okay with that is one of the most important things you can model, I think, as a leader.
Yeah, I totally agree with Jennifer. I'll be quick. I was also just going to adding like little symbols that can help people know that you are welcoming. So this way, LGBT folks, we don't always want someone to come out and say, "Oh, are you gay? How can I help you?" But just having a rainbow flag around, a trans flag, something simple, so people know that you are someone who people can talk to. That really helps open a door, and at least they know that they could talk to you, even if they don't want to.
I say two things. Earlier, I said just like ask a lot of questions, but actually, I would say before you ask someone about something that might be personal, think about whether it's coming from a place of curiosity or if there's like a specific like mentorship thing that you're trying to get out of it, that like information is going to help you with your mentorship. And the second thing is, I think the more you make yourself available, I think a lot of times in the lab, things can be really hectic and there's a lot of mentorship you have to do. And so there's every meeting is like brief and it's like you're just talking about the science. Like having meetings where there's like some empty space and they can kind of, there's some quiet and there's a pause, allows people to bring up things that are not working for them. So, um, yeah.
And I'll add one last thing, just from like the mentee side, is when someone is telling you something very personal and sort of a hardship in their career line that they're facing, like all you got to do, and this is all you got to do, just listen and trust them. Like they are putting their trust in you, so you have to put your trust in them. Um, and like, I don't know, that's improved my relationship with my mentees and my mentors. Just like having the trust between each other to do better.
Okay, thank you. I think we have more time for one more question.
I've got one, Daniela. I can share. This was a pre-submitted one. And I think maybe it would be good to start with or send it to Jennifer. And previous PIs have identified me as LGBTQ plus during NIH and NSF grant applications and as updates in their broader impacts and diversity statements. I have identified myself this way to the NSF during their post-PhD degree award survey and probably at other times. What do you think about the trap of this, given the rumblings of a new lavender scare? If things are more normalized a few years from now, has the calculus changed on representation or publicity? Do you feel that you've made yourself a target? how has the degree of backsliding we've experienced affected your considerations for the future? And I guess I'll start with Dr. Nemhauser, with the understanding that she's in a completely different power position than pretty much everybody else on the panel, and any early career trainee. So her experience can be totally different, but she will have maybe a specific perspective on the moment and identifying.
Yeah, I mean, things are really bad, and I think everyone has to figure out for themselves what the right path forward is. I wouldn't want to prescribe to anyone what they should or shouldn't do or how they should handle things. Um, for me, I have made the decision that I have had the amazing privilege of 20 years of having a lab, doing science I've loved with great people. And if this is how my career has to end, like in science, then I'm going to keep fighting to the last because I know how many people are still to come who haven't had that opportunity yet. And um, I don't know. I actually every year when my NIH money arrives, these last few years I have been shocked and grateful, and don't take it for granted that that will continue. And yeah, I guess I just don't know, but I would rather do yeah, I guess I just have to, I feel like I have to live my life as someone who's fighting for other people. That's just so core to who I am as a person. And I don't think I could look myself in the mirror if I traded that. But I also understand that I have enormous economic, career, like all sorts of privilege that like supports me in being able to make those choices. But yeah, I think that the question, a lot of people these days say to me that this is like overstated, this kind of fear. And I just want to say I disagree. Like I do in fact think that there are a lot of forces at work that with the current OMB regulations, for example, that could reach down and continue to destroy um, science in the United States. And science has, in academic spaces, despite all of its problems, been one of the most progressive forces at work. And so been one of the places where we've been able to open doors and really make arguments for why having different people's with really radically different life experiences at the table is worthwhile to do good work, and give people a living wage. Although, I know for a lot of graduate students, it still is a fight to be had, but it's definitely, you know, compared to some of the other options out there, we have also transformed economically a lot of people's lives. So anyway, that's a long answer. I guess I would just say, you are right to feel scared. And then you also have to you have to decide what you can live with, and what kind of life you want to, what kind of life you want to lead going forward. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It is definitely, it sucks. I mean, that's also true. I hate it. And I can't believe we're having these conversations. I can't believe the Voting Rights Act is like under, attack. There are a lot of things that just feel cruel and brutal right now. And so also taking massive care of yourself in whatever way you can is so important.
I can, hell of a question, right? I've been out for 20 years and I'm not going back in the closet no matter what. And I always, on my resume and CV, I always make sure to include LGBT stuff because if I get dinged for that, well, that's probably not a good place for me to wind up, honestly. It's kind of saving me the time of dealing with it. Of course, when it comes to grant funding, that becomes quite a bit more of an issue. But when it comes to jobs, I make sure it's upfront because that's who I'm bringing to work. um, yeah, that's my main comment.
A couple things. One is like being in or out of the closet is a choice, but at the same time, it's not. Like if you're authentically yourself, people will know oftentimes, and it's one of those things where like these rules and these expectations are set to kind of force you to like not be yourself and to try to make you hide and make you uncomfortable and scared. And so, and for real reasons, because you are in danger. And so sometimes it's like you just have to like like sometimes it's just noise and you just have to like consider that like just being authentic is kind of a necessity to existing in a lot of ways. And so you just kind of sometimes you don't have the option whether to take the risk or not is what I'm trying to say. I will also say, if it helps, if it helps to kind of encourage people, when you're out, it also brings that community to you because people see you. And so, like I said before, like my community has always been who has advocated for me and who has opened doors for me. And so at the same time as I am closing doors to people that probably are like dangerous for me to be around anyways, I'm also inviting people that genuinely support me and would advocate for me to find me and to be there for me. And so um, that's why I've made the choices that I've made. And I don't regret it. Um, and you don't have to tell the NIH necessarily, but but yeah.
Okay, well, I hope did everybody. I know we're a couple minutes over time, so if everybody had a chance to contribute the way they wanted, I just wanted to first thank our panelists for participating and sharing their perspectives. We had a wonderful conversation, and I think we could have. I would want to talk for hours and hours if I had my way. But I also really want to thank Danielle and Fernanda because they were the early career scholars that were elected to NASC, and I was really excited when this was one of the top two choices that we decided to work on for the year. And I had no input on that, so it was all on them. And I thank you so much for bringing this topic to our conversation. And I also want to thank Dr. Ment Ayalu, who is another NASC member who was part of our committee and helped develop this topic. So with that, would you please join me in thanking our panelists for coming today and talking with us?